A unique detail about trireme rowing was the crucial role of the auletes, a flautist who played a reed pipe instrument olos. This musician wasn't there for entertainment. They were the human metronome, providing the precise rhythm that the rowers followed. The auletes set the stroke rate, ensuring all 170 oars moved as one. Imagine trying to coordinate a human-powered warship without a clear beat. Chaos. The auletes was a vital, if unsung, member of the crew, literally providing the soundtrack to naval warfare. It's like having a DJ for your workout, but instead of EDM, it's ancient Greek flute. And instead of a gym, it's a death trap. Feel the beat. Feel the imminent ramming. Hey guys, tonight, we're winding the clock way back long before steel ruled the battlefield, before gunpowder even existed as a myth. We're diving straight into the scorched, dusty plains of ancient Greece, where legends were forged not in solo heroics, but in the grinding, unified push of 1,000 spears. Naval tactics centered around speed and precision. The main maneuvers were the diekplus, the breakthrough, and the periplus, the outflanking. In a diekplus, you'd aim to punch through the enemy line, then quickly turn and ram their unprotected stern or sides. Imagine driving a sleek speedboat through a line of slower, clumsier vessels, then doing a tight U-turn to hit them from behind. It required immense acceleration and pinpoint accuracy. The periplus involved outflanking the enemy, using your superior speed to circle around their formation and attack their vulnerable flanks or rear. It's like a game of dodgeball, but the ball is a 40-ton ship with a pointy bronze nose, and if you get hit, you lose the whole game, permanently. Think less of your cramped local YMCA and more of a massive, sprawling complex dedicated to relaxation and public life. The moment of ramming was terrifying. As your trireme approaches the enemy, the Kelliusts would issue the command, and all rowers would pull back their oars, pulling them into the ship to avoid damage. The ship glides forward on its accumulated momentum. The silence before impact, broken only by the rush of water and the shouts of the crew. Then, the sickening thud of bronze meeting wood, the splintering of timbers, the screams of men. Your ship shudders violently as the ram punctures the enemy's hull, tearing a gaping hole. Then quickly, you reverse oars, pulling your ship free to avoid getting entangled and to prepare for another pass. But let's be honest, those pristine images, they probably left out a few, details. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of marble and mythology to reveal why Roman baths, beneath all that grandeur, were actually, kind of gross. Like, really, truly, stomach-churningly gross. Prepare to have your idyllic visions of ancient Roman pampering gently, but firmly, shattered. Historians still debate the exact social status and composition of trireme rowers. While official Athenian policy stated that rowers were free citizens, some scholars argue that during prolonged wars, the need for manpower might have led to the conscription of metics, foreign residents, or even slaves, particularly for non-combat roles or as emergency measures. This would have significant implications for understanding the social fabric of Athenian naval power and the extent of its democratic ideals. Was the Athenian Navy truly a force of citizen volunteers, or did it, like many empires, rely on the less privileged to fuel its military might? It's a bit like debating whether your favorite band's success is all due to the lead singer, or if their session musicians are secretly doing all the heavy lifting. The truth is probably nuanced. You stride through the impressive arched entrance, perhaps admiring the intricate mosaics on the floor or the towering columns that reach towards the sky. The sheer scale of the place is breathtaking. You pass through the apoditerium, the changing room. Here's your first hint of something less than pristine. Imagine a large, often unheated room filled with dozens, perhaps hundreds, of people stripping down. There are no lockers with individual keys here. Instead, you stash your clothes and valuables in cubbyholes or on shelves. What about theft? You ask, yes, a very valid concern. It was rampant. Many bathers would bring a slave or a trusted servant to guard their belongings. But if you were a common citizen, you just had to hope for the best. It's like leaving your phone unlocked at a public pool and hoping no one decides to borrow it indefinitely. A bit of a gamble, wouldn't you say? The challenges of naval warfare were immense. Life at sea was harsh. Fresh water was scarce, often limited to what could be carried aboard or replenished at shore bases. Food was basic, usually hardtack and dried provisions. Sickness, scurvy, and dysentery were constant threats in the cramped, unsanitary conditions. And if your ship was damaged or sunk, survival in the open sea was far from guaranteed, especially if you were heavily armored. Imagine getting seasick while being crammed into a space smaller than your closet, knowing that one wrong move could send you to the bottom of the ocean. Suddenly, that heavy hoplon armor doesn't seem so bad after all. At least you're on solid ground. The air in the apoditerium is already thick with the scent of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and perhaps a faint whiff of something vaguely fecal. Remember, modern soap, as you know it, didn't exist. Romans used oils, often olive oil, to loosen dirt, which would then be scraped off. We'll get to that later. For now, you just navigate the throng, trying not to brush too closely against your fellow citizens. Personal boundaries were a bit fluid. Naval battles themselves were often chaotic and short-lived, unlike land battles, which could drag on for hours. A decisive ramming could end a ship's effectiveness in moments. The sea would be churned white by thousands of oars, littered with debris, splintered wood, and drowning men. The air would be filled with the cries of the wounded, the shouts of commanders, and the triumphant cheers of the victorious. The focus wasn't on holding a line, but on maintaining speed, achieving strategic positioning, and delivering decisive blows. It was a fluid, dynamic ballet of destruction. Next, you might head to the palestra, the open-air exercise yard. This is where Romans would work up a sweat before their bath. You see men wrestling, lifting weights, though not in the way you imagine. Think more like heavy stones, playing ball games, or simply running. The ground is probably dirt, churned by countless bare feet. The air is filled with the grunts of exertion, the slap of skin on skin, and the shouts of friendly or not-so-friendly competition, and, of course, the scent of fresh, vigorous sweat. Now, imagine all that sweat, dirt, and whatever else is clinging to their bodies before they even get into the water. It's like a gym where no one showers before getting into the pool. Fun, the psychological impact of facing a trireme ramming you was immense. You see the enemy ship bearing down on you, its bronze ram pointed like a monstrous spear. There's no shield wall to hide behind, no ground to hold. Your only hope is to maneuver, to avoid the devastating impact. The sounds of splintering wood, the screams of your shipmates, the sudden lurch as your vessel takes on water. It's a terror unique to the sea. And if you survive the initial ramming, you might find yourself in the cold, unforgiving water, still wearing your heavy armor, praying for rescue. It's like being in a very fast, very dangerous bumper car ride. But the bumper cars are real, and they actively try to kill you. Mind the gap. But the gap is your ship's hull. This pre-bath exercise ritual is a common historical fact. Romans believed it was essential to open the pores and prepare the body for the cleansing process. You weren't just taking a leisurely dip. You were embarking on a full-body regimen. But consider the reality. All those active bodies, sweating, shedding skin cells, stirring up dust, perhaps even bleeding from a wrestling mishap. This adds a delightful cocktail of organic material to the general ambiance of the baths. Triremes weren't just weapons. They were symbols of naval power, projecting a city-state's influence across the Aegean. For Athens, in particular, its massive trireme fleet was the cornerstone of its empire, allowing it to control trade routes, project power, and ultimately fund its democratic ideals. The ability to build, man, and maintain such a fleet was a testament to the organizational prowess and collective will of the Athenians. It was an investment on a scale that few other ancient powers could match. After your workout, you proceed to the tepidarium, the warm room. This is a transitional space designed to acclimate your body to the increasing heat of the subsequent rooms. The temperature is pleasant, a gentle warmth that begins to relax your muscles. You might recline on benches, chatting with friends, or simply sitting quietly, enjoying the mild heat. The air is steamy, a soft haze obscuring the marble walls and ceilings. This is where the social aspect of the baths really comes into play. It's a public space, a meeting ground for all classes of Roman society, from slaves accompanying their masters to senators discussing politics. Imagine trying to have a serious political debate while someone nearby is having their back vigorously scraped. It takes a certain level of focus, wouldn't you say? So, as you heave on your oar, feeling the immense power of the trireme surging beneath you, you are part of a different kind of ancient Greek war machine. Not a wall of bronze on land, but a swift, deadly arrow on the sea. Your strength, your synchronization, and your courage are just as vital as any hoplites. The fate of your polis depends on your ability to row, to ram, and to survive the relentless, terrifying dance of naval combat. A unique detail about the tepidarium is that it often contained small pools or fountains, but these were primarily for splashing or rinsing, not for prolonged immersion. The water, while warm, was likely not frequently changed, acting more as an atmospheric element than a true cleansing pool. So, while you might be enjoying the gentle warmth, you're also probably breathing in microscopic particles of everything that has passed through that room. Dust, skin cells, evaporated sweat. It's like a human-scented fog machine. Delicious. You've faced the phalanx's push and the trireme's ram. But what happens when the battle isn't on an open field or the vast sea, but around the formidable walls of a city? You are now a soldier, either besieging or defending, and your focus shifts from direct confrontation to a grueling test of patience, ingenuity, and sheer willpower. Ancient Greek cities, recognizing the vulnerability of open settlements, were often protected by impressive fortifications, These were not mere fences. They were massive walls, often built with cyclopean masonry. Remember those huge, unmortared stones we talked about in an earlier episode, sometimes reaching dozens of feet high and equally thick? Imagine trying to break into a giant, very angry rock garden. Historians still debate the exact social etiquette and level of intermingling within the Roman baths. Was it truly a place where all classes freely mixed? Or were there unspoken rules and designated areas that maintained social hierarchies? Some scholars argue that, while the baths were publicly accessible, wealthy Romans often visited, at less crowded times, or had their own private sections within larger complexes, minimizing contact with the lower classes. Others contend that the communal nature of the baths fostered a unique sense of Roman identity and a rare opportunity for social interaction across divides. The truth probably varied greatly, depending on the specific bath complex, the city, and the individual's status. It's like trying to figure out if your local high-end gym actually has a diverse clientele, or if everyone just secretly drives the same expensive car. The evidence is inconclusive. A common historical fact is that Greek siege warfare, particularly in earlier periods, was less about elaborate siege engines and more about brute force and attrition. The preferred method for attackers was often simply to starve the city out. You, as a besieging soldier, would participate in establishing a circumvallation, a ring of fortifications built around the enemy city to cut off all supplies and prevent any sorties. This wasn't glamorous work. It involved endless digging, building watchtowers, and constant vigilance. You'd be living in temporary camps, exposed to the elements, dealing with disease, and constantly on guard for desperate attacks from within the city. It's like a very long, very uncomfortable camping trip, but with the added excitement of knowing people are trying to kill you. Now, you brace yourself for the caldarium, the hot room. This is where the real heat is, often heated by a hypocaust system, a common historical fact, where hot air from a furnace circulates under the floor and through hollow tiles in the walls. The temperature in the caldarium could be scorching, reaching well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes closer to 120 or even 130 degrees. The air is thick with steam, so dense you can barely see across the room. You can feel the sweat immediately beating on your skin, then pouring down your body. It's like stepping into a human-sized pressure cooker, or a really intense hot yoga class, but with more naked people and less scented candles. As a defender, your role would be equally grueling. You'd man the walls, keeping constant watch, repairing any damage, and conserving precious resources. Imagine the tension as food supplies dwindle, as fresh water becomes a luxury, and as sickness begins to spread through the cramped conditions inside the city. You'd ration your meals, perhaps even eating your own animals, knowing that every bite and every drop could be your last. The psychological pressure of a siege, the slow, agonizing wait for relief or surrender, was a different kind of warfare altogether. It's a battle of wills, where time is the greatest weapon. In the caldarium, there's usually a large, deep pool of hot water. This is where you actually immerse yourself. And here's where things get really, truly gross. This pool was almost certainly not drained and refilled for every bather, or even every day. Imagine hundreds of people, all of whom have just exercised and sweated profusely, all of whom have scraped off varying degrees of grime, all sharing the same body of water. This is a common historical fact that might make you reconsider your Roman holiday plans. This hot, stagnant water would quickly become a murky soup of sweat, dirt, dead skin cells, oil, and whatever else had been clinging to the bodies of the Roman populace. It's basically a giant human stew. Yum. The early methods of attacking fortifications were often desperate. Ladders were common, as were attempts to undermine walls by digging tunnels beneath them. Imagine trying to scale a massive stone wall under a hail of arrows and stones, while the defenders above are actively trying to push you off with long poles. Or imagine digging a tunnel in the dark, damp earth, knowing that the tunnel could collapse on you at any moment, or that the defenders might dig down and meet you with spears. These were incredibly dangerous, labor-intensive tactics, often resulting in heavy casualties for the attackers. It's like trying to break into Fort Knox using a spoon. You might eventually get there, but you'll probably have a bad day first. A unique detail about these hot pools is that, due to the constant influx of organic material, a film would often develop on the surface of the water, a kind of scum or residue from all the bather activity. Imagine swimming in a pool where you can actually see the collective efforts of everyone else's hygiene routine floating on top. You'd probably try to stick to the edges or just submerge quickly and hope for the best. It's not just visually unappealing. It's a potent breeding ground for bacteria. You might get clean from the dirt on your body, but you're probably picking up a whole new assortment of microscopic friends from the water. A unique detail about Greek fortifications is the isosdomos masonry style, prevalent in later periods. This involved carefully cut and fitted rectangular blocks, often without mortar, creating incredibly strong and visually impressive walls. These weren't just defensive structures, they were architectural masterpieces. Imagine walls so perfectly constructed that you can barely fit a knife blade between the stones. This precision made them highly resistant to ancient siege engines, forcing attackers to find more creative or more brutal solutions. It's like building a Lego castle, but with real stone, and it actually has to withstand a battering ram. Historians still debate the actual frequency of water changes in these large communal pools, while some bath complexes had sophisticated systems for continuous freshwater flow. Others, especially smaller public baths, likely had much less frequent water changes due to the immense logistical challenge of heating and moving such vast quantities of water. Was it a daily refresh, a weekly one, or only when the water became noticeably foul? The evidence is inconsistent, varying by the bath size, its funding, and the prevailing standards of the time. It's like trying to figure out how often your gym cleans its locker rooms. You know it happens, but you don't really want to think about the specifics. Historians still debate the role of treachery or internal strife in the fall of besieged cities. Was it more common for a city to fall due to a brilliant siege tactic, or due to a disgruntled citizen opening a gate from within? Ancient accounts often highlight instances where betrayal played a decisive role, suggesting that the psychological strain of a siege could lead to internal divisions. However, attributing every capture to treachery might also serve as a way for chroniclers to explain unexpected defeats without diminishing the prowess of the defenders. It's like trying to figure out why your team lost the big game. Was it genuinely better tactics? Or did someone just forget to tie their shoelaces? academic arguments are usually a bit more nuanced than that. Beyond the water, consider the other surfaces. The marble benches, the walls, the very air, all are covered in condensation, steam, and the lingering residue of countless bodies. Imagine sitting on a wet, steamy bench that hundreds of other sweaty, unsoaped bodies have just occupied. The concept of cleanliness was simply different. It was about ritual purification and the removal of visible dirt, not germ theory. They had no idea about the invisible world of bacteria and viruses, which were having an absolute field day in the warm, humid environment of the baths. It's like trying to clean your house with just a feather duster. It looks fine from a distance, but upon closer inspection, it's still pretty dusty. Over time, Greek siegecraft evolved, particularly with the advent of more sophisticated engines. The Helepolis, or taker of cities, was one such innovation. A massive, multi-storied siege tower often covered in iron plates to protect against fire. Imagine a towering, wheeled fortress, perhaps 150 feet high, bristling with archers and javelin throwers on its upper levels, and a massive battering ram at its base. These were moved by sheer manpower, sometimes hundreds of men pushing from within. You, as a defender, would watch in terror as this monstrous machine slowly rumbled towards your walls, knowing that it meant direct assault was imminent. And let's not forget the tools. The strigil, that curved metal scraper we mentioned earlier, was a common historical fact, used to remove the oil and loosened dirt from the body. You'd apply oil, rub it in, then use the strigil to scrape it all off, along with whatever grime had accumulated. This was often done by slaves or servants, or by bath attendants if you paid a small fee. Imagine someone scraping your entire body with a metal tool. Sounds a bit invigorating, doesn't it? But also potentially a bit painful if not done correctly. The battering ram, a common historical fact of siege warfare, also evolved. Early rams were simple logs wielded by men. Later versions were massive timbers, often tipped with a metal head, suspended from a frame and swung by dozens of men. Imagine the rhythmic thud as this enormous log repeatedly slams into your city walls, each impact sending tremors through the stone, loosening mortar, and creating cracks. The noise alone would be terrifying, a constant reminder of the relentless assault. You'd hear the groaning of timbers, the splintering of wood, the ominous creak of the ram. A unique detail about the strigil is that it wasn't always cleaned rigorously between uses, especially in busy public baths. Imagine sharing a communal scraping tool, or having your servant use a strigil that had just been used on another bather, perhaps one with a skin ailment or an unfortunate rash. The potential for spreading skin infections or other nasties was quite high. It's like sharing a communal loofah at a gym. You probably wouldn't do it today, but in ancient Rome, it was just part of the routine. Hey, can I borrow your strigil mines a bit rusty? For defenders, counter-siege tactics were crucial. You'd use long poles with hooks to try and snag enemy siege ladders, pulling them away from the walls. You'd drop heavy stones, logs, or even boiling water and hot sand onto the attackers below. Remember that ancient Greek sunscreen from our last episode? You'd probably need it for the hot sand. You'd also build countermines, tunnels dug from within the city to intersect and collapse the enemy's undermining efforts. This was a subterranean war, fought in darkness and cramped conditions, where every shovel stroke could mean life or death. historians still debate the overall health impact of Roman baths. While they promoted a degree of personal hygiene compared to previous eras, did they also inadvertently contribute to the spread of certain diseases due to the communal nature of the pools and the lack of proper sanitation for tools? Some scholars argue that the benefits of regular bathing outweighed the risks, improving overall public health. Others contend that the baths were likely breeding grounds for skin conditions, eye infections, and respiratory illnesses due to the warm, humid, and often unhygienic conditions. The evidence is complex and often relies on archaeological findings and interpretations of medical texts. It's like trying to decide if that super trendy new diet is actually good for you, or if it's just making you really gassy. The jury's still out. A unique detail of defensive tactics was the use of fire pots or incendiary devices. Defenders would sometimes fill ceramic pots with burning pitch, sulfur, or other flammable materials, then hurl them over the walls onto the siege engines or attacking forces below. Imagine the panic as burning projectiles arc through the air, showering your siege tower or your comrades with liquid fire. These were crude but effective psychological and physical weapons, designed to inflict maximum chaos and fear. It's like a very messy, very fiery water balloon fight, but with serious consequences. So, while the Roman baths were undoubtedly architectural marvels and vital social hubs, offering a unique blend of leisure, exercise, and rudimentary hygiene, they were also, by modern standards, a bit of a biohazard. The pristine marble and soaring arches hid a grimy, sweaty, often murky reality. You might have left feeling refreshed, but you probably also left with a few new microscopic companions. And that, my friends, is the surprisingly gross secret behind the grandeur of Rome's majestic bathhouses. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle, or half the reason you'll never want to time travel back there for a spa day. Historians still debate the relative effectiveness of offensive versus defensive siege tactics in ancient Greece. Did the ingenuity of the defenders generally outweigh the power of the attackers, or did persistent assault eventually prevail? Some scholars argue that well-supplied and well-manned defenses were almost impregnable in the absence of overwhelming force or internal betrayal. Others point to examples of successful sieges, suggesting that advances in siege technology or sheer determination eventually broke even the strongest walls. The evidence is complex, often relying on biased accounts from victors or desperate pleas from the defeated. It's like trying to figure out who's winning a chess game by only looking at the pieces that have been captured. You get part of the picture, but not the whole strategy. You are a hoplite, not a king, not a general, not even a particularly renowned warrior. You're just you, a free citizen of a Greek city-state, a polis. Maybe you own a small plot of land. Maybe you're a skilled artisan in the city's bustling marketplace. Your hands are accustomed to the feel of a plow handle, the cool clay on a potter's wheel, or the rough texture of wool. But now, they grasp something far more significant, the hoplon, your large circular shield, the very namesake of your military class. This isn't some dainty buckler or a lightweight ornament. This is a formidable piece of equipment, typically made from a sturdy wooden core, often faced with a thin sheet of hammered bronze. It's about 3 feet in diameter, a massive dinner plate of death that covers you from chin to knee. And it's heavy, probably around 15 to 20 pounds. maybe even more depending on the specific design and materials. Imagine strapping a small car tire to your arm and trying to sprint across a field. Your gym routine has absolutely nothing on these guys. The psychological toll of a siege, for both sides, was immense. For the attackers, it was the frustration of slow progress, the constant attrition from skirmishes, and the threat of disease in the camps. For the defenders, it was the gnawing fear of starvation, the psychological strain of being trapped, and the constant vigilance against a breach. Both sides were living under immense pressure, enduring hardships that tested the limits of human endurance. You don't just hold this shield, you wear it. Its design is ingenious, and perhaps a little terrifying in its implications for personal space. You slide your left arm through a central bronze band, the porpax, and then your hand grips a leather loop, the antilabe, near the rim. This double grip system distributes the weight more evenly and allows you to hold the shield firmly against your body, turning your left arm into a solid, unyielding brace. It's a design that screams, "I am here to push, not to run." The problem, of course, is that with your left side so heavily protected, your right side is left somewhat vulnerable. You're leaning into that shield, relying on the guy to your right to cover your exposed flank with his own shield. This shared vulnerability is key to the entire system, a beautiful, brutal ballet of mutual reliance. It means you absolutely have to trust the person next to you. No trust, no phalanx, just a bunch of individually vulnerable targets. It's like a group project where everyone actually has to do their part, or you all fail spectacularly. So, whether you were enduring the slow agony of starvation within the walls, or pushing a massive siege tower towards a seemingly impregnable fortress, siege warfare in ancient Greece was a brutal, often drawn-out affair. It was a test not just of military might, but of logistical prowess, engineering skill, and the sheer unyielding will of the human spirit. The clang of bronze on bronze was replaced by the thud of battering rams and the silent gnawing of hunger. But the stakes, for your polis and your very survival, remained as high as ever. This shield, your hoplon, is the cornerstone of the phalanx, the legendary fighting formation that dominated ancient Greek warfare for centuries. Forget what you've seen in Hollywood movies where everyone is running around in individual duels like a disorganized mosh pit. The reality was far more disciplined, far more claustrophobic, and infinitely more terrifying. You aren't fighting as an individual. You are a single, unyielding brick in a living wall of bronze and muscle. Picture this: you're standing shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield, with the man next to you. His hoplon overlaps yours by a good foot or more, creating a continuous, almost impenetrable barrier. Then, behind you, stand another 4, 6, or even 8 rows of men, all similarly interlocked. The man behind you is probably nudging your back with his own shield, providing a relentless, forward momentum. You can feel his breath on your neck, smell his sweat, hear his frantic heartbeat. Personal space. What's that? You've stood on the battlefield, pushed in the phalanx, rode in the trireme, and endured the grueling siege. But none of that matters. None of it is even possible without the silent, unseen heroes of ancient Greek warfare logistics. This isn't about glory or individual bravery. It's about the relentless, mundane, and absolutely critical work of supplying an army. A common historical fact is that armies literally march on their stomachs, If your soldiers aren't fed, watered, and equipped, the finest tactics and the bravest hoplites in the world won't win a single battle. Imagine trying to fight a war when your soldiers are hangry and dehydrated. Good luck with that morale. The phalanx wasn't just a formation. It was a psychological weapon. Imagine being on the receiving end of this human bulldozer. You're looking at a shimmering wall of bronze, bristling with long spears, slowly but inexorably advancing. There's no obvious way in, no weak points, just a relentless, metallic tide. It's less like a fight and more like a human-powered battering ram. The sheer psychological pressure of facing such a unified, determined mass of humanity was often enough to break an enemy's will before the actual clash. The sheer scale of supplying even a modest Greek army was immense. Picture thousands of men, plus their auxiliary troops, servants, and pack animals. Each one needs food and water every day. Multiply that by weeks, months, or even years for extended campaigns. This wasn't like ordering pizza for everyone. There were no massive supply trucks, no refrigerated containers, no instant noodles. Everything had to be sourced locally, carried by hand, or transported by slow, cumbersome ox carts or ships. Your daily bread, your dried fish, your wine, it all had to get to you, often across hostile terrain, under constant threat. Each hoplite carried not just his shield, but a formidable array of other gear. Your helmet, likely made of bronze, would be heavy and hot, muffling sounds and restricting vision. The iconic Corinthian helmet, for instance, covered almost your entire head, leaving only narrow slits for your eyes and mouth. Breathing was probably a challenge, and seeing your comrades or the enemy clearly was definitely out of the question. You'd also wear a cuirass, a chest plate, typically made of bronze or stiffened linen, a linothorax, protecting your torso. Bronze greaves would guard your shins, and perhaps arm guards protected your forearms. All of this adds up. We're talking an extra 50 to 70 pounds of gear. Minimum. You're not just a soldier. You're a walking, breathing, heavily armored package delivery service. And you have to fight in it. Under the scorching Mediterranean sun. Good luck with that. As a soldier on campaign, you would often carry a basic ration of provisions. Perhaps a few days' worth of barley cakes maza, some dried meat or cheese, and a water skin. This is a common historical fact. Individual soldiers were expected to be somewhat self-sufficient for short periods, but for anything longer, or for larger armies, organized supply lines were absolutely crucial. These often involved foraging in enemy territory which, as you can imagine, could get complicated, requisitioning supplies from allied cities, or relying on dedicated supply convoys. It's like planning a massive road trip. But every gas station is either closed, hostile, or requires you to trade your shield for a gallon of water. The primary offensive weapon of the hoplite was the dory, a long spear, typically 7 to 9 feet in length, tipped with an iron or bronze blade. You'd hold this spear overhand, or sometimes underhand, thrusting it forward through the gaps in the shield wall, aiming for any exposed flesh. It's less about fencing and more about poking, pushing, and prodding. The sheer number of spear points protruding from the front rank of a phalanx would have been terrifying. It's like facing a porcupine that can move, slowly, menacingly, but it moves. And if your spear broke, you'd draw your xiphos, a short, straight sword, or a kopis, a curved, chopping sword for the close quarters. brutal work that followed the initial impact. Water, even more than food, was the lifeline of any ancient army. Imagine marching under the scorching Mediterranean sun in full bronze armor, pushing that heavy hoplon, your mouth dry, your throat burning. Dehydration was a far more immediate threat than a spear point for many soldiers. Armies would often choose their routes based on the availability of reliable water sources, rivers, springs, wells. You'd drink from stagnant puddles if you had to, risking disease, just for a moment of relief. A common historical fact is that battles were often fought near water sources, not just for tactical advantage, but for survival. It's like finding a Starbucks in the middle of the desert, absolutely critical for continued function. Training for a hoplite wasn't like modern military academies. You weren't a professional soldier in the same vein as a Roman legionary. You were a citizen first, a soldier second. Your training would likely involve endless drills in maintaining formation, marching in step, and holding the line. It wasn't about individual heroics or fancy swordplay. It was about discipline, cohesion, and resisting the primal urge to run when faced with overwhelming terror. You'd learn to trust the weight of the man behind you, the solid press of the shield to your left. You became part of something larger than yourself, a human organism whose survival depended on every cell performing its function. This emphasis on collective strength over individual prowess is a common historical fact that sets Greek warfare apart from many other ancient military traditions, where individual champions often played a more decisive role. A unique detail about water supply was the reliance on local populations, and, often, the digging of temporary wells or cisterns. While marching, detachments would often be sent ahead to secure water points or to begin digging. Imagine the sheer labor involved hundreds of men, often exhausted from marching, digging furiously under the sun to hit the water table, knowing that their lives and the lives of their comrades depended on it. Sometimes, these wells were deliberately poisoned by the enemy, leading to devastating outbreaks of disease. It adds a whole new layer of paranoia to your morning commute, doesn't it? Did someone spit in the water cooler? One unique detail about the phalanx, often overlooked, is the aspis gap phenomenon. Because each hoplite held his shield on his left arm, covering his left side and the right side of his neighbor, units tended to drift to the right during a march or advance. The rightmost men in each rank, feeling their unprotected right flanks, would instinctively move closer to the man on their left, creating a slight rightward shift in the entire formation. This meant that two opposing phalanxes often didn't meet head-on, but instead passed through each other slightly, leading to desperate fighting on the exposed flanks. It's like trying to walk in a perfectly straight line while constantly bumping into your friends on one side. Eventually, you're all going to be veering off course. Historians still debate the relative efficiency and vulnerability of ancient Greek supply lines. Were they robust enough to support sustained, large-scale campaigns, or did they inherently limit the scope and duration of warfare? Some scholars argue that the relatively short campaigns and limited territorial gains of many Greek wars were a direct consequence of logistical constraints. Others point to successful long-distance expeditions, suggesting that Greek states, particularly Athens with its naval power, developed sophisticated, if slow, supply networks. The truth probably varies wildly depending on the city-state and the specific campaign, much like trying to determine the efficiency of modern mail delivery. Sometimes it's lightning fast. Other times, your package ends up in a different continent. The actual clash of two phalanxes was not a graceful dance. It was a brutal, terrifying scrum. Imagine the sound of the rhythmic thud of thousands of feet marching, the metallic clang of bronze shields scraping against each other, the shouts and roars of men, the snapping of spear shafts, the heavy breathing, the desperate grunts, the smell of sweat, fear, and freshly spilled blood would be overpowering. You'd be pushing, shoving, stabbing, trying to maintain your footing while the enemy did the same. It was a test of sheer endurance, willpower, and collective strength. You didn't just fight. You pushed, you shoved, you heaved, trying to overwhelm the enemy's line. It was like a giant, deadly rugby scrum, but with pointy bits and a lot more screaming, beyond food and water. Armies needed equipment, weapons broke. Armor was damaged, sandals wore out. You needed spare spears, new sword blades, replacement shield straps, and even basic tools for camp maintenance. These supplies also had to be transported, often carried by dedicated porters or pack animals like mules. Imagine an ancient Greek version of Amazon. But the delivery guy is a sweating soldier, and your package is a very sharp spear. Historians still debate whether the phalanx was a rigid, unbreakable wall or a more flexible, adaptable formation. Some argue that its strength lay in its unyielding density, a solid mass that simply rolled over anything in its path. Others contend that such a formation would be too cumbersome, too slow, and that hoplites must have maintained some degree of individual maneuverability within the larger structure. Was it a tightly packed human wall that moved as one, or a series of interlocking, smaller units capable of subtle adjustments? The truth probably lies somewhere in between, varying by city-state, commander, and terrain. Imagine trying to get 1,000 people to walk in a perfectly straight line, in sync, without anyone tripping or getting distracted by a shiny object. It's a logistical nightmare even today, let alone on a dusty, uneven battlefield with spears flying around. Medical supplies were rudimentary but essential. You'd need bandages, herbal remedies, remember Doña Elena from our other story, splints for broken bones, and basic tools for extracting arrowheads or closing wounds. A common historical fact is that ancient medicine, while not as advanced as today, recognized the need for battlefield care. Physicians and healers would accompany armies, often working under horrific conditions with limited resources. Imagine patching up a gaping wound with only rudimentary tools and a few herbs, while the sounds of battle still rage around you. It's like being a field medic in a very old, very painful video game. Just put some dirt on it. Please don't actually do that. The psychological aspect of being a hoplite can't be overstated. You weren't just fighting for land or glory. You were fighting for your city-state, for your family, for your very way of life. The bond between hoplites was incredibly strong, a camaraderie forged in shared vulnerability and collective purpose. You knew that your life depended on the man to your left holding his shield firm, and his life depended on you doing the same. It was a powerful, existential commitment. If one man faltered, the entire line could be compromised, creating a breach that could lead to devastating losses. No pressure, right? Just the fate of your entire society resting on your ability to hold your ground and push. It's like being the guy at the end of a human centipede, except way more violent and with far worse breath. A unique detail about camp sanitation, often overlooked, is the basic but vital practice of digging latrine trenches away from water sources. While not always perfectly enforced, commanders understood the link between poor hygiene and disease. Imagine thousands of men living in close quarters for weeks or months. Without basic sanitation, disease would spread like wildfire, crippling an army faster than any enemy phalanx. It wasn't glorious, but digging those trenches was as important for survival as sharpening your spear. It's like trying to get your roommates to do their dishes, absolutely essential for living together. But nobody wants to talk about it. This deep reliance on the collective also meant that individual acts of cowardice were severely punished, not just legally, but socially. Losing your helmet or your cuirass in battle was one thing, understandable, even if shameful. But losing your shield, your hoplon, that was the ultimate disgrace. It meant you had abandoned your post, leaving your comrade exposed, breaking the sacred bond of the phalanx. It wasn't just about protecting yourself. It was about protecting the man next to you. Your hoplon was a shared burden, a symbol of your commitment to the polis and to your fellow citizens. Imagine the awkward conversations at the local taverna if you came back without your shield. So, about that battle, Dave, where'd your hoplon go? It fell off. Yeah, that's it. Nobody would buy that. Historians still debate the precise impact of disease on ancient Greek military campaigns. Was it truly the silent killer, often causing more casualties than battle itself? Some scholars argue that ancient armies were constantly ravaged by illness due to poor sanitation, contaminated water, and limited medical knowledge, effectively limiting their fighting capacity. Others suggest that while disease was a factor, its impact varied greatly, depending on the season, climate, and the specific army's discipline. It's like trying to calculate the exact number of times you've had the common cold. You know it's a lot. But pinning down the specifics is tough. So, when you stood in the phalanx, waiting for the command to advance, you weren't just a random citizen. You were a product of years of societal conditioning, physical hardening, and psychological preparation. You were a living embodiment of your city-state's martial ideals, ready to contribute your strength, your courage, and if necessary, your life to the collective. The bronze on your shield gleamed under the sun, a reflection of the shared purpose that bound you to the men beside and behind you. You were a piece of the golden cage, now transformed into a formidable weapon, waiting to be unleashed. You were not born a hoplite. You were forged into one, piece by painful piece, from the tender age of 7. Your childhood, unlike the carefree romps of modern youth, was a relentless curriculum designed to harden your body, discipline your mind, and instill in you an unshakable loyalty to your polis. For the boys of Sparta, of course, this was an extreme reality. The agoge, a brutal state-sponsored training system that stripped away individuality and cultivated an almost inhuman stoicism. You were taken from your family, housed in communal barracks, and subjected to a harsh regime of physical exertion, military drills, and even ritualized deprivation. You learned to endure hunger, cold, and pain without complaint. Imagine your 7-year-old self, bundled up in a flimsy tunic, sleeping on a bed of reeds you harvested yourself, in a barracks so cold your teeth chatter like castanets. And then you have to wake up before dawn for a forced march. Suddenly, your current daily commute doesn't seem so bad, does it? The burden of logistics often fell disproportionately on the common soldier. While formal supply trains existed, especially for large expeditions, individual hoplites were often expected to carry their own gear and several days' rations. Imagine marching for miles, sometimes in oppressive heat, with your heavy armor, shield, spear, and a pack containing your food, bedding, and personal effects. This was a testament to the incredible physical endurance required of a Greek citizen soldier. Your legs would burn, your shoulders would ache, and every step would be a conscious effort. It's like moving house, but you have to carry everything yourself. And there's a good chance someone will try to stab you at your destination. But even if you weren't Spartan, if you hailed from Athens, Thebes, or Corinth, the emphasis on physical fitness and military readiness was paramount for all free male citizens. From adolescence, you participated in gymnastic exercises, wrestling, and running, not just for sport, but for survival. You drilled with your shield and spear, learning the proper thrust, the correct way to brace for impact, how to pivot in formation. These weren't casual weekend workouts. They were integral to your identity as a citizen. Your ability to defend your city was your most fundamental civic duty, a right and a responsibility inextricably linked. You might complain about jury duty or taxes, but imagine if failing to run 5 miles meant your city falling to invaders. Suddenly, those taxes look quite reasonable. Even the transportation of casualties was a logistical challenge. There were no ambulances, no medevac helicopters. Wounded soldiers had to be carried from the battlefield by their comrades or by designated porters, often over rough terrain, back to a temporary camp or a nearby city. Imagine the sheer effort and time involved in moving hundreds or even thousands of injured men, often under pressure, while still engaged in active combat. It was a brutal, inefficient process, highlighting the raw, unforgiving nature of ancient warfare. This concept of the citizen soldier is a common historical fact central to ancient Greek society. Unlike many other civilizations that relied on professional armies or mercenaries, the Greek city-states largely depended on their own free citizens to fight. You weren't paid a regular salary. Your reward was the continued freedom and prosperity of your polis and your family. This meant that the stakes were incredibly high in every battle. You weren't just fighting for some abstract king or distant empire. You were fighting for your home, your olive groves, your very livelihood. This direct personal investment in the outcome of battle likely fueled a ferocity and determination that professional armies might sometimes lack. It's easy to fight for a paycheck, but it's a whole different ball game when your mom's pottery shop is on the line. So, while the clash of bronze and the roar of battle might capture the imagination, the true backbone of ancient Greek warfare lay in the unsung, often unglamorous world of logistics, the ability to feed, water, and equip thousands of men, to transport them across hostile landscapes, and to care for their wounded. This was the silent architect of victory, a testament to the organizational prowess and relentless effort required to sustain military might in a world without modern conveniences. It's a reminder that sometimes the most heroic feats aren't found on the front lines, but in the painstaking, unseen efforts that make those front lines possible. Your everyday existence, even outside of formal training, was steeped in the martial ethos. Every athletic contest, every public festival, subtly reinforced the values of courage, discipline, and communal solidarity. You'd see veterans, scarred but honored, walking the streets. You'd hear tales of past glories, of heroes who stood firm against overwhelming odds. These stories weren't just bedtime fables. They were blueprints for how you were expected to behave when your turn came. You ate simple meals, practiced frugality, and valued physical prowess over intellectual pursuits, especially in the more militaristic states. Imagine a society where the star athlete is also considered the most virtuous citizen. Wait, is that actually so different from today? Never mind. You've endured the physical hardships, the psychological terrors, and the logistical nightmares of ancient Greek warfare. But the battle for victory wasn't fought solely with bronze and muscle. It was also waged in the murky, often unsettling, realm of the mind. Imagine standing on a battlefield, not just worried about the enemy's spears, but about a sudden flock of birds, a strange dream you had last night, or the color of a sacrificed animal's liver. This is where psychological tactics and religious omens played their often decisive, and sometimes bizarre, roles. The armor you wore, your panoply, was not issued by the state. You bought it yourself, or inherited it. This meant that the quality and completeness of your gear could vary, depending on your personal wealth. A rich hoplite might have a gleaming bronze cuirass and a perfectly crafted Corinthian helmet. A poorer citizen might make do with a sturdy linothorax, a linen breastplate hardened with glue, or perhaps just his shield and helmet. This personal investment in your equipment reinforced your status as a free, contributing member of society, capable of equipping yourself for its defense. It also meant that losing your gear in battle was a significant financial hit, not just a tactical one. Oh no, my Xiphos broke. That's a week's wages right there. A common historical fact is that ancient Greeks placed immense importance on religious rituals and omens before battle. You wouldn't just march off to war. First, there would be elaborate sacrifices to the gods, especially Zeus, Athena, and Ares. Animals, typically sheep or goats, would be offered, their entrails meticulously examined by the mantis, or seer. The color, shape, and condition of the liver, in particular, were seen as direct messages from the divine. A perfectly formed, unblemished liver, auspicious; a misshapen or discolored one, doom. Imagine the pressure on that poor mantis. So, Bob, what's the verdict? Are we fighting today, or is the cow's spleen telling us to stay home and prune the olive trees? It really put a lot of weight on bovine anatomy. The psychological preparation for battle was as crucial as the physical. Before a major engagement, rituals and sacrifices to the gods were commonplace. You'd gather with your fellow hoplites, listening to prophecies, observing omens, hoping for divine favor. The mantis, or seer, would read the entrails of sacrificed animals, searching for signs of victory or impending doom. Imagine waiting for your life to be decided by how a sheep's liver looks. It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? These rituals weren't just superstition. They were vital for bolstering morale, instilling a sense of collective purpose, and calming the inevitable pre-battle jitters. You'd stand there, gripping your spear, feeling the collective anxiety, but also the collective hope, the belief that the gods were on your side. These omens weren't just for show. They deeply affected morale. If the omens were favorable, you and your comrades would march with renewed confidence, believing the gods were on your side. If they were unfavorable, a creeping sense of dread and doubt would spread through the ranks, potentially crippling an army's will to fight before a single spear was thrown. A general might even delay battle or interpret a bad omen in a more favorable light, if the tactical situation demanded it. It was a delicate dance between divine will and practical military necessity. Music also played an important role in the psychological preparation. Before the phalanx advanced, a paean would be sung, a solemn hymn to Apollo, the god of light, music, and healing, but also of archery and plague. This slow, measured chanting, accompanied by the rhythm of flutes, the ulos, helped keep the ranks in order and regulated the advance. It wasn't exactly battle music in the modern sense, more like a very intense, very slow-marching band. But imagine the effect: thousands of men, moving as one, chanting, the mournful yet determined sound filling the air. It was a psychological trick, both for you and for your enemy, projecting an image of calm, disciplined resolve. It's like a military parade, but instead of confetti, there's a strong chance of being impaled. Beyond the formal rituals, more subtle psychological tactics were employed. Imagine the enemy performing a terrifying war dance before the battle, their shouts echoing across the field, their shields banging rhythmically. Or perhaps they would display the heads of defeated enemies on pikes, a brutal visual reminder of what awaited you. These were crude but effective ways to instill fear and doubt in the opposing forces. You're trying to focus on holding your shield, but all you can think about is that really creepy dance move the guy in the front row is doing. A unique detail about the hoplites' personal gear, particularly during the early periods, was the absence of practical footwear. Many hoplites wore simple sandals or, in some cases, went barefoot. Imagine running, pivoting, and fighting in heavy armor on rough, uneven terrain without proper boots. The sheer toughness required to endure that alone is mind-boggling. This makes those Achilles' heel myths even more poignant, doesn't it? This lack of advanced footwear speaks to a different understanding of battlefield conditions, and perhaps a greater reliance on the sheer resilience of the human body. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. But your feet are the knives. A unique detail about psychological warfare was the use of false reports, or deliberately misleading information. Before a major battle, generals might send agents or even captured prisoners who were then allowed to escape into the enemy camp with exaggerated tales of their army's size, strength, or the arrival of powerful reinforcements. Imagine waking up in your tent to a panicked rumor that the legendary Amazons have joined the enemy ranks. You'd probably be less concerned about your breakfast. This could sow confusion and demoralization, potentially causing the enemy to abandon a favorable position or even flee prematurely. It's like spreading fake news, but with far more immediate and pointy consequences. Did you hear their phalanx is made of solid gold? Really sounds heavy, but also shiny. The diet of a hoplite was simple, but nutritious, reflecting the agricultural basis of Greek society. You'd consume large amounts of bread, often barley bread, accompanied by cheese, olives, and sometimes dried fish or cured meat. Wine, diluted with water, was the common beverage. There were no energy bars or protein shakes. Your fuel came directly from the land. This diet sustained you through long marches and intense training, providing the raw energy needed for the brutal physical demands of hoplite warfare. You might miss your mom's cooking, but at least you wouldn't have to deal with kale smoothies. Historians still debate the true impact of omens and psychological warfare on battlefield outcomes. Did the Greeks genuinely believe in the absolute power of omens, or were they primarily tools used by commanders to control the morale of their troops? Some scholars argue that a strong belief in divine favor was a genuine motivator, leading to unwavering courage. Others contend that cynical commanders manipulated these beliefs for their own strategic ends. The truth is likely a blend of both. Much like trying to figure out if your friend is genuinely excited about your terrible cooking or just being polite. It's a matter of interpretation. Historians still debate the exact composition and command structure of the phalanx. Was it truly a monolithic block? Or were there smaller, more agile subunits within it? How did commanders communicate orders across a massive, noisy formation? Some scholars propose that the phalanx might have functioned more like a series of interconnected lines, allowing for some flexibility. Others maintain a stricter interpretation, emphasizing the rigid discipline. The challenge lies in interpreting ancient texts, which often focus on the heroic or the ideal, rather than the mundane realities of military logistics. It's like trying to reconstruct a complex dance routine from a few blurry photographs, and a very enthusiastic but vague description. The sound of the salpinx, a bronze trumpet, was another powerful psychological tool. It wasn't used for musical entertainment, but for issuing commands, rallying troops, or signaling charges. Imagine the sudden, piercing blast of the salpinx cutting through the pre-battle tension, signaling the advance. It's a sound that instantly commands attention, sending a jolt of adrenaline through your veins, telling you that the moment has come. For the enemy, it was a terrifying herald of impending doom, an auditory assault designed to shatter their resolve. It's like the alarm clock on Monday morning, but instead of coffee, it signals imminent danger. Your motivation to fight, beyond civic duty, was also deeply rooted in the concept of arete, loosely translated as excellence or virtue. For a hoplite, arete meant demonstrating courage, self-control, and skill in battle, contributing to the collective good of the polis. Dying gloriously in battle was considered the ultimate expression of arete, ensuring your name would be remembered and honored. Imagine a society where dying at work is considered a peak achievement. No, not like that. More like dying in a way that truly serves your community and earns you everlasting respect. It was a powerful incentive, driving men to stand firm even in the face of certain death. You weren't just fighting for your life. You were fighting for your legacy. The display of standards and banners was also a form of psychological messaging. Each polis would have its own distinctive emblem, perhaps an owl for Athens, a lamb for Sparta, just kidding. It was a lambda for Lacedaemon, their official name, but a lamb would be cuter, wouldn't it? These banners, often carried by prominent citizens, served as rallying points and visual affirmations of identity. Imagine seeing your city's emblem waving proudly in the wind, a symbol of your collective identity and purpose, reminding you of what you were fighting for. For the enemy, it was a clear sign of who they were facing, a visual representation of their formidable foe. It's like seeing your favorite sports team's flag waving, instant team spirit. Unless you're on the other side, then it's just annoying. The experience of marching to battle, particularly for a city-state like Athens, often involved traversing considerable distances. You wouldn't just show up at the battlefield. you'd march for days, loaded down with your panoply, carrying minimal provisions. The journey itself was an arduous test of endurance, weeding out the weak before the first clash. You'd experience blisters, chafing, and the constant ache of weary muscles. And remember that heavy shield, you'd be carrying that for miles. This pre-battle exhaustion often played a significant role in the outcome of engagements, affecting the stamina and coherence of the phalanx once it finally reached the enemy. It was like a marathon, but the finish line is a spear to the face. One often overlooked detail is the practice of leaving wounded or dead enemies on the field as a psychological deterrent. While Greeks generally respected certain battlefield conventions, a brutal display of the fallen could be used to demoralize a retreating enemy or to send a clear message to neighboring cities. Imagine seeing the grim aftermath of a battle, the bodies of your comrades left unburied, a stark warning against resistance. It's a chilling reminder of the brutal realities of war. So, when you stood in the phalanx, waiting for the command to advance, you weren't just a random citizen. You were a product of years of societal conditioning, physical hardening, and psychological preparation. You were a living embodiment of your city-state's martial ideals, ready to contribute your strength, your courage, and, if necessary, your life to the collective. The bronze on your shield gleamed under the sun, a reflection of the shared purpose that bound you to the men beside and behind you. You were a piece of the golden cage, now transformed into a formidable weapon, waiting to be unleashed. Historians still debate the extent of psychological operations in ancient Greece. Were commanders consciously employing sophisticated techniques to manipulate enemy morale? Or were these actions more intuitive and less formalized? Some scholars argue that Greek generals, being highly intelligent individuals, would have understood the power of fear and intimidation. Others contend that many actions were rooted in cultural or religious practices rather than deliberate psychological strategy. The truth probably lies in the subtle interplay between instinct, tradition, and calculated manipulation, a murky blend of belief and cunning. It's like trying to figure out if your boss's motivational speech is genuine or just a tactic to get you to work harder. Probably a bit of both. The sun beats down on your bronze helmet, turning it into a miniature oven. The air is thick with dust, sweat, and a primal tension that makes your stomach clench. You're in the front rank of the phalanx, perhaps the most terrifying place to be, or perhaps the safest, depending on how you look at it. To your left, the heavy curve of your neighbor's hoplon presses against your own, a reassuring weight. To your right, your own shield extends, protecting his exposed side. You are, quite literally, intertwined. Behind you, the rhythmic thud of thousands of armored feet sends vibrations through the ground, a low, guttural growl that speaks of relentless momentum. You can hear the strained breathing of the men in the ranks behind, feel their occasional nudges as they adjust their footing. A living, breathing, bronze-plated organism moving as one. The concept of the sacred band is another unique detail that highlights the psychological aspect of Greek warfare. The most famous example is the sacred band of Thebes, an elite unit composed of 150 pairs of male lovers. The idea was that men would fight more bravely and fiercely to protect their beloved partner than they would for a mere comrade. This created an incredibly cohesive and highly motivated fighting force, renowned for its courage and discipline. Imagine facing a unit where every soldier is fighting not just for their life, but for the life of the person they love most in the world. That's a pretty powerful incentive. You definitely don't want to get between those guys. The paean, that solemn chant to Apollo you sang before the advance, has faded, replaced by the rising crescendo of war cries and the chilling thud of shields striking shields. You can now clearly make out the enemy phalanx, a shimmering wall of bronze just like yours. Bristling with their own forest of spears, they are advancing too, slowly, inexorably, like two immense prehistoric beasts about to collide. Your commander's voice, a hoarse roar, cuts through the din. Push, push. This is it, the moment of truth. All those years of training, all those drills in the gymnasium, all the tales of arete, it all culminates here, in this agonizing, terrifying push. So, when you stood on the ancient Greek battlefield, you weren't just confronting physical weapons. You were battling against unseen forces, fear, doubt, superstition, and the carefully crafted psychological strategies of the enemy. The war was fought not just on the dusty plains, but in the minds of the men. A complex interplay of faith, courage, and the subtle art of intimidation. And sometimes a perfectly healthy sheep liver could be just as decisive as a perfectly thrown spear. The actual collision of two phalanxes was a truly unique and brutal phenomenon, a common historical fact often misinterpreted. It wasn't about individual duels, not really. It was a massive, collective shove. Imagine 1,000 people in a gigantic, utterly disorganized mosh pit, but everyone has a spear and a very heavy shield. Actually, no, that's too disorganized. Think of it more like two gigantic human battering rams meeting head-on. The initial impact is jarring, a thunderous clang of bronze on bronze, accompanied by the snapping of spear shafts and the guttural roars of men. You feel the immense pressure against your shield, a wave of force that threatens to knock you off your feet. You push back, every muscle straining, trying to maintain your footing. The men behind you add their weight, their shields pressing into your back, urging you forward. It's a test of brute strength, of collective willpower. You've learned about the hoplite's shield, the brutal clash of the phalanx, the auxiliary troops, naval warfare, sieges, and even the mind games of battle. But ancient Greek warfare, like a dusty, forgotten scroll, holds even more secrets, tactics, and decisive moments that often get overlooked in the shadow of more famous battles. It wasn't always about massive, head-on collisions. Sometimes, the greatest victories were won by cleverness, unexpected maneuvers, or the innovative use of terrain and troops. You're about to unearth some of these forgotten strategies and pivotal moments that truly redefined what was possible on the ancient Greek battlefield. Your dory, your long spear, is thrust forward, aimed at the narrow gaps in the enemy's shield wall. You're not trying to pierce through their bronze. You're aiming for their necks, their bellies, their exposed thighs, any patch of skin not covered by armor. It's a chaotic, claustrophobic melee. Your vision, already limited by your helmet's eye slits, is further obscured by the dust, the sweat, and the sheer press of bodies. You can smell the copper tang of blood, the acrid scent of fear, and the metallic odor of hot bronze. It's a sensory overload, a nightmare brought to life. A common historical fact is that while the phalanx was the dominant formation, its inherent rigidity made it vulnerable to certain tactical innovations. Imagine a formidable but somewhat inflexible block of armored men. It's great for pushing forward, But if you can get around its flanks, or create gaps within its structure, you can cause devastating damage. This vulnerability led to brilliant minds devising new ways to counter its perceived invincibility, often by focusing on speed, maneuverability, or creating overwhelming local superiority. It's like realizing your super tough robot has a glaring weakness if you just hit it in the knee. Whoops. A unique detail about this clash is the concept of the othismos, the push. This wasn't merely a figurative term. The battle literally devolved into a shoving match, a sustained effort to push the opposing line back, to break their formation. The men in the rear ranks were just as important as those in the front, their continuous pressure providing the momentum. You wouldn't be fighting with elegant sword play, but with brute force, leaning into your shield, using your entire body weight to drive forward. It was a constant, exhausting struggle, measured in inches, sometimes feet. Losing even a foot of ground could lead to a breach, a catastrophic collapse of your line. It's like trying to win a game of tug-of-war, but with your entire village, and the rope is made of very angry, very pointy sticks. And if you lose, the losing team might, shall we say, cease to exist. No pressure. One such tactical innovation, often associated with the Thebans, was the oblique order. This wasn't a frontal assault. It was a deliberate, calculated imbalance in the phalanx itself. Imagine your phalanx, usually uniformly deep, suddenly becomes much deeper and stronger on one flank, while the rest of the line is deliberately thinned out or held back. This common historical fact was a revolutionary departure from the traditional uniform phalanx. The deeper, stronger wing would then crash into a specific, usually stronger point of the enemy line, hoping to punch through and cause a rout. Meanwhile, the weaker wing would refuse to engage directly, holding back to avoid being outflanked. It's like playing rock, paper, scissors. But you always go with rock really hard in one specific spot, and pretend the other hand isn't even there. If your spear breaks, and it will often, you draw your zephos or kopis. These short swords are for the up-close, personal, and utterly brutal work. You're stabbing, hacking, and swinging in the impossibly tight confines between shields. The fighting is desperate, relentless. The sounds are horrifying, the grunts of exertion, the cries of pain, the sickening thud of blade on bone. You don't have room to swing broadly. It's short, sharp movements, driven by primal survival instincts. You're fighting for every breath, every inch of ground. A unique detail about the oblique order is its psychological impact on the enemy. When you, as an opposing hoplite, saw a phalanx advancing with one wing incredibly deep and fast, while the other seemed to hang back, it was deeply unsettling. It wasn't the expected symmetrical clash. It created immediate confusion and forced a rapid tactical reassessment. The enemy commander would have to decide, do I thin my line to match the extended enemy flank, weakening my core, or do I reinforce my threatened point, leaving other areas vulnerable? This element of surprise and forced adaptation gave the attacking side a significant advantage, often leading to panic and disorganization even before the actual impact. It's like someone showing up to a chess game with a bowling ball instead of a pawn. Unexpected, and probably effective in disrupting your strategy. Historians still debate the exact duration and intensity of the othismos. Was it a sustained, hours-long push, or did one side quickly break after the initial impact? Some scholars argue that maintaining such intense physical exertion for long periods would be impossible, suggesting that battles were often decided quickly once a phalanx began to waver. Others point to accounts of prolonged engagements, suggesting that sheer willpower and continuous rotation of ranks, though this is also debated, allowed for extended pushing matches. The truth is likely complex, varying by the discipline of the troops, the terrain, and the quality of leadership. It's like trying to figure out if your neighbor's really going to finish building that shed, or if it's just going to sit there half-finished for another decade. The evidence is inconclusive. Historians still debate the exact origins and spread of the oblique order. Was it a spontaneous genius stroke by a single commander, like Epaminondas of Thebes, or a gradual evolution of tactical thought refined over generations? Some scholars argue that while Epaminondas masterfully employed it at Leuctra, its theoretical underpinnings might have existed before. Others contend that his innovative application fundamentally changed Greek warfare. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but its impact is undeniable. It's like trying to pinpoint the exact inventor of the wheel. Someone had to be first, but the idea probably evolved over time. You feel the terror, the instinct to flee, but something keeps you rooted. It's the men beside you, the men behind you, the unbreakable bond of the pulleys, the years of indoctrination, the knowledge that turning your back means exposing your unarmored spine to a spear point. You also know that running means disgrace, shame, a life of ostracism back home. The pressure to stand firm, to uphold your arete, is immense. You glance to your left, seeing the strained, determined face of the man next to you, his eyes wide, mirroring your own fear. You see his spear thrust forward, then retract, dripping. You're all in this together, locked in a dance of death, beyond formal, tactical formations. Individual commanders sometimes employed brilliant, less-known strategies that turned the tide of battles. Take, for instance, the Battle of the Eurymedon River, a common historical fact often overshadowed by Marathon or Thermopylae. Here, the Athenian general Cimon faced a combined Persian land and naval force. Instead of a direct engagement, Cimon launched a daring double assault. He defeated the Persian fleet, then immediately landed his marines and led them in a surprise land attack against the unprepared Persian army camped on shore. It was a complete rout, a master class in combined arms and rapid exploitation of victory. You've just sunk their navy, and now you're immediately landing on their beach to kick them while they're down. Talk about efficiency. One of the less intuitive aspects of phalanx combat is the limited visibility inside the formation, particularly with the iconic Corinthian helmet. Your peripheral vision was almost non-existent. You could see directly ahead, maybe a narrow sliver to the sides, but anything happening outside your immediate frontal arc was a mystery. This meant you relied heavily on auditory cues and the feel of the formation. You'd hear the shouts of your officers, the cheers or groans of the men, the sounds of impact, and you'd feel the collective push and pull, the slight shifts in pressure that told you if your line was holding or faltering. It's like trying to navigate a crowded grocery store with a bucket on your head. You know something's happening, but you're mostly just feeling your way through it. Excuse me, coming through with my deadly pointy stick. A unique detail about Cimon's strategy at Eurymedon was the relentless pursuit. Unlike many Greek battles, where the pursuit of a routed enemy was often limited, Cimon pushed his troops to maximum effort, ensuring the complete destruction of the Persian force. This not only secured a decisive victory, but also sent a powerful message of Athenian naval and military superiority. It's like winning a race, but then you just keep running around the track, just to show off how much energy you still have. Yeah, we won, and we're still going. You guys are tired. Right. The fear is constant, a cold knot in your stomach, but it's mingled with a strange adrenaline. You're not thinking, you're reacting. Thrust, push, brace, pivot, repeat. The battle becomes a blur of primal instinct and trained discipline. You're aware of the man to your left, his shield still firm, still overlapping yours. You're aware of the relentless pressure from behind. You are a single cell in a much larger, violent organism. Historians still debate the true strategic genius of Timon. Was he a lucky commander who seized opportune moments, or a visionary who understood the potential of combined land and naval operations long before his time? Some argue that his aggressive tactics were simply a reflection of Athenian imperial ambition. Others believe he was a tactical innovator who, unfortunately, didn't have his own Xenophon or Thucydides to immortalize his brilliance. It's like trying to figure out if your band's drummer is a genius or just really good at keeping time. Depends on who you ask, right? The sheer noise of a phalanx battle would have been deafening. Beyond the clang of bronze and the shouts, imagine the guttural roars, the desperate screams of the wounded, the rallying cries, the trumpets blowing, the clatter of dropped weapons. It would be a cacophony, making communication nearly impossible beyond the simplest commands. Commanders would often rely on prearranged signals, hand gestures, or trusted messengers weaving through the ranks. But mostly, it was about instinct and drilled responses. You didn't need to be told to push when the men behind you were already shoving. It's like trying to have a conversation at a rock concert. You get the gist, but you're mostly just nodding and hoping for the best. Then there are the forgotten skirmishes and engagements that, while not massive set-piece battles, held immense strategic significance. The Battle of the Pylos, during the Peloponnesian War, is a common historical fact that illustrates this. A small Athenian force, led by Demosthenes, landed at Pylos, built a fort, and trapped a Spartan force on the island of Sphacteria. This wasn't a traditional phalanx clash. It was a siege, a naval blockade, and a light infantry assault, culminating in the unprecedented surrender of Spartan hoplites, something almost unheard of in Greek history. Imagine Spartans, the epitome of unwavering courage, actually raising their shields in surrender. It sent shockwaves through the Greek world. The ground beneath your feet becomes churned up, muddy with dust and sweat. Perhaps something worse. Maintaining your footing is critical. A slip, a fall, and you could be trampled underfoot. An anonymous victim of the relentless push, your greaves and cuirass, while heavy, provide crucial protection. You feel the glancing blows against your bronze, the impact jarring your arm, but the armor holds. This isn't a battle of skill, but of attrition, of who can endure the punishment longer, who can maintain their cohesion under unimaginable pressure. A unique detail of the Pylos campaign was the effective use of Psylloi light infantry against heavily armored hoplites. The Spartans on Sphacteria, isolated and vulnerable, were harassed relentlessly by Athenian archers and javelin throwers. Their heavy armor became a liability in the broken terrain, and the relentless missile attacks wore them down. It proved that brute force wasn't always the answer, and that agile, missile-armed troops could, under the right circumstances, overcome the seemingly invincible phalanx. It's like realizing that instead of hitting a tank with another tank, you can just send in a bunch of very annoying, very fast drones. Game changer. The battle could last for hours. A grueling test of endurance. Or it could be over in minutes if one side broke and fled. The Greek concept of victory often wasn't about annihilation, but about breaking the enemy's morale, causing them to rout. Once a phalanx broke, it was a slaughter. The hoplites, heavily armored and slow, would be cut down by the lighter, faster enemy pursuit. So, the moment your line began to waver, the moment you saw a gap, the decision to flee or fight to the last man was a stark, life or death choice. And remember what happens if you drop your shield and run social ruin. So, you'd probably rather take a spear to the chest than face the neighborhood gossip. Historians still debate the long-term impact of the Spartan surrender at Sphacteria. Did it permanently tarnish the Spartan reputation for invincibility? Or was it merely an anomaly quickly forgotten? Some argue that it shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility and contributed to their eventual decline. Others contend that while it was a shock, Spartan military prowess quickly recovered. The truth is probably somewhere in the nuances of perception and propaganda. It's like trying to figure out if that one embarrassing thing you did in high school really affected your adult life. Or if you just think it did. Probably a bit of both. As the opposing phalanx finally gives way, you feel a sudden, exhilarating surge of momentum. Their line buckles, then shatters. The wall breaks, and the disciplined fight becomes a chaotic chase. You push forward, no longer a part of the tightly packed formation, but part of a surging, victorious mob. The battle is won. The exhaustion is immense. Your muscles screaming, your lungs burning, but the adrenaline still courses through you. You've done it. You've held the line. You've contributed to the glory of your polis. You've survived. For now. The sun still beats down, but now it feels like a warm embrace. The promise of another day. Finally, consider the tactical shifts that occurred towards the end of the classical Greek period, paving the way for the Macedonian phalanx. The use of longer spears, sarissas, deeper formations, and better integration of cavalry and light troops were gradual innovations that built upon the hoplite tradition. These weren't sudden, revolutionary changes, but subtle evolutions driven by necessity and the insights gained from centuries of warfare. It's a common historical fact that military doctrine rarely undergoes instant, radical shifts. It's usually a slow, incremental process of adaptation, while the hoplite phalanx justly steals the spotlight. A common historical fact often gets overshadowed. Ancient Greek warfare wasn't just about heavy infantry. Imagine a heavyweight boxing match where both fighters are lumbering giants. Sure, they're the main event, but what about the nimble, quick-footed sparring partners? The guys who zip around, land jabs, and wear down the opponent before the big knockout blow. That's where the cavalry, archers, and light infantry come into play. Their roles, though often underestimated by modern perceptions of Greek battles, were absolutely crucial in shaping the course of engagements, providing support, harassment, and critical pursuit capabilities. They were the unsung heroes, or at least the less heavily armored ones, often working in the periphery of the thunderous clash you just experienced. A unique detail of this evolution was the increasing professionalization of armies. As city-states grew larger and conflicts became more protracted, the reliance on citizen soldiers who had to return to their farms after short campaigns became less sustainable. The emergence of professional soldiers and more specialized units, even before Philip II of Macedon, marked a shift in how warfare was conducted. It was a transition from citizen militias to standing armies, driven by the increasing complexity and demands of war. It's like your favorite garage band suddenly getting a record deal and having to hire a full-time road crew. It changes the dynamic, but hopefully in a good way. First, let's talk about cavalry. When you picture ancient Greek warfare, horses might not be the first thing that springs to mind, especially compared to the formidable cavalry of the Persians or later, the Macedonians. And for good reason. Greek cavalry was generally less developed and less decisive than its hoplite counterpart. Why? Well, for one, Greece is a mountainous region, not exactly ideal terrain for massive cavalry charges. Imagine trying to gallop a horse up Mount Olympus while wearing armor. Not going to happen. Plus, horses were expensive, very expensive. Only the wealthiest citizens, the aristocracy, could afford to own, maintain, and train war horses. This makes Greek cavalry a common historical fact of privilege and limited scale. You weren't just born into the right family. You were born into the right tax bracket. Historians still debate the extent to which these tactical innovations were truly Greek, or influenced by interactions with other cultures, particularly Persia. Did the Greeks independently develop these strategies, or were they inspired by observations of their enemies? Some argue for an indigenous evolution, driven by internal competition among city-states. Others suggest a more fluid exchange of ideas across the ancient world. The truth probably lies in a complex tapestry of internal genius and external influence, a blend of independent thought and adaptive learning. It's like trying to figure out if your great idea was truly original, or if you subconsciously picked it up from that random YouTube video you watched last week. The human brain is a funny thing. You, as a potential cavalryman, would be part of the elite. You'd ride bareback or on a simple saddlecloth, as stirrups weren't invented yet. Your main weapons would be javelins for throwing and a sword or kopis for close quarters fighting. You're not smashing into phalanxes, that's suicidal. Instead, your job is harassment, flanking maneuvers, and pursuit. Imagine riding in swirling formations around the enemy's main line, peppering them with javelins, trying to break their cohesion or draw out their light troops. The dust kicked up by your horses, the glint of your bronze helmets, the psychological impact of mounted warriors. It's a terrifying sight, even if you're not making direct contact. You're essentially the ancient Greek version of a drive-by shooting, but with spears. So, while the image of the hoplite phalanx remains iconic, remember that ancient Greek warfare was far more diverse and tactically sophisticated than often portrayed. It was a dynamic arena of innovation, where brilliant commanders adapted, experimented, and sometimes, through sheer ingenuity, turned the tide of history. From the oblique order to combined arms assaults, these forgotten strategies and decisive moments remind us that even in the dust and chaos of battle, the human mind was constantly seeking new ways to gain an advantage, to secure victory and to redefine the art of war. A unique detail about Greek cavalry is their limited integration with the phalanx. Unlike later armies, where cavalry and infantry often worked in highly coordinated combined arms tactics, Greek city-states tended to deploy them somewhat separately. The phalanx would advance, and the cavalry would operate on the flanks, often engaging the enemy's own cavalry or disrupting their skirmishers. It wasn't always a perfectly synchronized dance. Sometimes it was more like two different bands playing at the same concert. This often meant missed opportunities for decisive blows, where a well-timed cavalry charge could have broken a wavering phalanx. It's like having a superhero team where everyone just kinda does their own thing. Effective, but not optimized. You've marched. You've fought. You've sailed. You've laid siege. And you've delved into the minds of ancient Greek warriors and commanders. Now, as our journey through ancient Greek warfare draws to a close, it's time to consider the enduring legacy of these conflicts, the scars of victory, the seeds of philosophy, and how these wars fundamentally reshaped Greek society and left an indelible mark on military thought for millennia to come. It wasn't just about who won or lost a particular battle. It was about the profound societal changes wrought by constant conflict and the ideas that emerged from the crucible of war. Historians still debate the true effectiveness of Greek cavalry. Were they a decisive force in certain battles, or largely a ceremonial adjunct for the wealthy? Some argue that their real value lay in protecting the flanks of the slow-moving phalanx and in running down routed enemies after a victory. Others contend that in certain terrain, where they could operate freely, they could be quite impactful, especially against less disciplined opponents. The evidence is scattered, often biased towards the hoplite narrative. It's like trying to judge a band based solely on their lead singer, ignoring the rhythm section that keeps everything together. A common historical fact is that the Peloponnesian War, 431-404 BC, a protracted and brutal conflict between Athens and Sparta, fundamentally reshaped the Greek world. Imagine fighting a war that drags on for nearly 3 decades, a grinding struggle that pits former allies against each other, exhausts resources, and shatters the very fabric of society. This wasn't a quick skirmish, it was a total war, impacting every aspect of life in the warring city-states. The agricultural heartland of Attica, Athens' territory, was repeatedly ravaged by Spartan incursions, forcing the rural population to abandon their farms and seek refuge within the long walls that connected Athens to its port. Piraeus. This mass urbanization led to overcrowding, sanitation issues, and the devastating Athenian plague, a brutal reminder that sometimes the greatest enemy isn't an opposing army but disease. It was like living through a really long, really miserable reality TV show where everyone is constantly stressed, hungry, and has a bad cough. Next up, archers. Now, when you think of Greek warfare, you probably don't picture a hail of arrows, and you'd be mostly right. Unlike the massive archery corps of the Persian Empire, Greek city-states generally fielded relatively few archers. Why? Well, for one, archery was often considered a less heroic form of combat. It was seen as fighting from a distance, without the honorable face-to-face clash of the hoplite. This perception is a common historical fact that reflects Greek cultural values about courage and direct confrontation. You didn't get arete points for shooting someone from a mile away. You got them for staring death in the face with a big shield. The sheer cost of continuous warfare, particularly for democracies like Athens, was immense. The population drain from battle casualties, disease, and starvation was devastating. Imagine your city, once thriving with vibrant young men, now filled with widows and orphans. The economic disruption was equally profound. Trade routes were disrupted, agricultural lands were destroyed, and the public treasury was constantly depleted to fund military campaigns. This led to increasing taxation, social unrest, and a shift in wealth and power dynamics within the polis. It was a harsh lesson in the true price of ambition. So, who were these archers? Often, they weren't native citizens. They were foreign mercenaries, recruited from places like Crete, renowned for their archery skills, or from Thrace. Imagine being a Cretan archer, traveling across the Aegean Sea, landing in Athens, and being hired to shoot people you have no personal quarrel with. It's a job, a dangerous, but potentially lucrative job. You'd wield a composite bow, a powerful weapon made from layers of wood, horn, and sinew, capable of delivering a punchy blow. Your arrows would fly in a high arc, raining down on the enemy formation, creating a terrifying psychological effect and hopefully causing casualties before the phalanxes met. This prolonged warfare also led to a significant shift in the nature of military service, a unique detail often overlooked. While the ideal of the citizen soldier remained potent, the reality of extended campaigns and the need for specialized skills led to the increasing reliance on professional soldiers, often mercenaries. Imagine being a hoplite who's expected to leave his farm for a few weeks of campaigning. Now, imagine being asked to fight for years, constantly away from your livelihood. It simply wasn't sustainable for many. So, city-states began to hire professional fighters from places like Thrace or Arcadia, men who fought for pay rather than just civic duty. This professionalization marked a gradual but significant departure from the original hoplite ideal, and foreshadowed the larger professional armies of the Hellenistic period and beyond. It's like your local community garden suddenly needing a full-time, paid security guard because the squirrel problem got a bit out of hand. A unique detail about Greek archers is their role in softening up the enemy. They weren't usually aiming for precision kills. Instead, they'd launch volleys designed to cause chaos, injuries, and demoralization. Imagine standing in a tightly packed phalanx, waiting for the impact, when suddenly arrows start raining down from above, thudding into shields, sticking in the ground, or worse, finding unprotected flesh. Even if an arrow didn't kill, a debilitating wound could remove a man from the line, creating a weakness. It's like getting pelted with golf balls right before a big meeting. Annoying, distracting, and potentially painful. Did that just hit my ear? I can't believe this. Historians still debate whether the professionalization of Greek armies primarily weakened the democratic ideals of the city-states, or if it was a necessary adaptation for survival in an increasingly complex military landscape. Some scholars argue that it eroded civic participation and made warfare less about collective defense and more about the ambitions of rulers. Others contend that it was a pragmatic response to the changing demands of protracted conflicts and the rise of larger empires. The truth is probably a nuanced interplay of both factors, as is often the case with complex historical developments. It's like trying to decide if your favorite band got better or sold out. when they started using synthesizers. Some say it's progress, others miss the raw, acoustic sound. Historians still debate the overall impact of Greek archers on battlefield outcomes. Were they truly effective, given their relatively small numbers, or were they primarily a psychological weapon? Some argue that their real value was in skirmishing and pursuit, engaging light enemy troops or harrying a retreating foe. Others suggest that their presence, even if limited, forced the enemy to react, disrupting their formations and creating opportunities for the hoplites. The challenge is that ancient accounts often don't give them much credit, focusing instead on the glory of the hoplite charge. It's like trying to write a hit song without a drummer. You can, but it's probably not going to be as impactful. Despite the internal strife and devastating losses, the Greek wars also forged enduring military philosophies that echoed through history. The concept of the phalanx itself, with its emphasis on discipline, cohesion, and collective action, deeply influenced later military thinkers. You remember the shared vulnerability of the hoplon and the othismos, that idea of a unified pushing force, where every man's life depends on his neighbor's steadiness, was incredibly powerful. The Roman legions, centuries later, would adapt and refine these principles of disciplined, collective infantry combat. Learning from the Greek model, it's like attending a master class in ancient martial arts, then applying those core principles to your own, slightly different, fighting style. Finally, let's consider the light infantry, the siloi. These were the skirmishers, the javelin throwers, the slingers, the unsung heroes who operated on the fringes of the main battle. They were typically poorer citizens who couldn't afford the full hoplite panoply, or sometimes young men who hadn't yet come of age to serve in the phalanx. Their equipment was minimal, a few javelins, a sling and stones, perhaps a small shield or just a tunic. Their speed and agility were their main defenses. This makes their flexible roles a common historical fact. They adapted to the terrain and the situation. You're not waiting in line for battle. You're already out there, running, dodging, and making noise. The Greek emphasis on arete, on demonstrating excellence and virtue in battle, also left a philosophical legacy. While often associated with individual glory, it was ultimately tied to the collective good of the polis, the ideal of the citizen soldier, ready to defend his community and his way of life, remained a powerful archetype. This wasn't just about physical prowess. It was about moral courage, self-sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. Imagine a society where every citizen felt a profound personal responsibility for the collective security. It's a pretty intense civic lesson, right? No skipping class on this one. Your role as a silos would be to harass the enemy before the main clash, to throw your javelins or sling your stones, trying to cause casualties and disorder. Imagine darting forward, launching a volley of sharp, heavy javelins, then quickly retreating before the enemy's more heavily armored troops could reach you. It's hit-and-run tactics, designed to wear down the enemy's patience and their numbers. You're like the annoying gnats at a picnic. You don't kill anyone, but you make everyone's life miserable. A unique detail, a poignant symbol of victory's impermanence, was the ancient Greek practice of erecting a tropaeum trophy. After a battle, the victorious side would often gather the captured arms and armor of the defeated enemy, helmets, shields, breastplates, spears, and arrange them on a tree trunk or a wooden pole. This improvised monument was erected on the battlefield itself, near the spot where the enemy first turned to flight. It was dedicated to a god, often Zeus or Ares, as a sign of divine favor. A common historical fact is that these tropea were explicitly not meant to be permanent. They were made of wood and decaying bronze, left to rot and rust in the elements. Imagine the rain washing away the blood, the sun fading the colors, the metal slowly oxidizing. It was a deliberate choice. A unique detail about the psiloi is their often vital role in protecting the flanks of the phalanx. The heavy, slow-moving hoplites were vulnerable to fast, missile-armed skirmishers attacking their exposed sides. The psiloi would engage these threats, ensuring the integrity of the main line. They were the shield of the phalanx's shield, so to speak, a crucial protective layer that allowed the heavy infantry to focus on their primary task. It's like having tiny, super-fast bodyguards for your main bodyguard. Don't touch my big shieldy friend. Why leave them to decay? This unique detail speaks volumes about the Greek understanding of victory and man's hubris. A permanent monument might suggest eternal dominance, an affront to the gods who ultimately controlled the fates of men. The decaying tropaeum served as a poignant reminder that human victories are fleeting, that today's triumph could be tomorrow's defeat, and that pride should always be tempered with humility. It was a powerful philosophical statement etched in bronze and wood. Yeah, we won, but don't get too comfortable, because the gods are watching, and nothing lasts forever. Also, these shields are really heavy, so we're just gonna leave them here. Historians still debate the precise tactical integration of psiloi with hoplites. Were they truly effective in engaging heavily armored opponents, or were their attacks mostly a nuisance? Some scholars believe that their ability to fight on rough terrain, where phalanxes struggled, made them invaluable. Others suggest their primary contribution was against other light troops, or in the pursuit phase after a rout. The truth is likely dependent on the specific battle and the skill of the commanders in utilizing their diverse forces. It's like trying to decide if the opening act of a concert is just filler, or if it genuinely warms up the crowd for the main event. It depends on the band, right? Historians still debate the extent to which this practice truly reflected genuine humility, or was a pragmatic recognition of the difficulties of transportation and the potential for a return to battle. Did they genuinely believe the gods would be offended by permanent trophies? Or was it simply easier to leave them behind? Some argue for the profound religious and philosophical motivations. Others suggest a more practical explanation. The truth, like many things in ancient history, is probably a blend of both belief and convenience. It's like trying to figure out if your great idea was truly original, or if you subconsciously picked it up from that random YouTube video you watched last week. The human brain is a funny thing. The sounds you'd hear as a psilos would be different from the clang of the phalanx, the whizzing of javelins, the sharp crack of a sling stone, the hurried footsteps, the shouts of encouragement or warning. You'd be more aware of your surroundings, less insulated by heavy armor. The smell of the earth, the dry grass, the wind in your hair. You're connected to the environment in a way the hoplite isn't. You're lighter, faster, more adaptable. You might not have the glory of the front rank, but your contribution is no less vital. The scars of victory, then, were not just physical. They were societal and philosophical. The constant warfare shaped Greek political structures, from the rise of tyrants to the evolution of democratic ideals often forged in the crucible of shared military service. It fostered a deep appreciation for civic duty, for the defense of one's homeland, but also exposed the brutal costs of intercity rivalry. The economic landscape was forever altered, and the demographic shifts left lasting impacts. These auxiliary troops, the nimble cavalry, the ranged archers, the fast skirmishers, were essential pieces of the ancient Greek military puzzle. They softened the enemy, protected the flanks, pursued the routed, and generally added layers of complexity to battles that are often oversimplified to just hoplites pushing. They highlight that even in an era dominated by a single iconic formation, military success required a symphony of different skills and roles, each playing its part to secure victory. So, the next time you picture a Greek battle, remember that while the hoplite was the hammer, there were plenty of other specialized tools in the toolbox, chipping away at the enemy, setting up the big blow, or cleaning up the mess afterwards. But from these scars emerged the seeds of a legacy that transcended the battlefield. The tactical innovations, the understanding of combined arms, the importance of logistics, and the psychological dimensions of warfare. These lessons were not lost. They were recorded by historians like Thucydides, analyzed by philosophers, and later studied by military commanders for centuries. The concept of disciplined infantry, of strategic maneuvering, and of adapting to new threats became fundamental tenets of military science. You were part of this grand experiment, a living testament to humanity's endless struggle to organize, to fight, and to understand the nature of conflict. You've stood in the phalanx, felt the push, endured the chaos. You've even glimpsed the swirling dance of the cavalry and the deadly rain of arrows. But now, you find yourself not on solid ground, but on the restless, shimmering surface of the Aegean Sea. You are a rower, a nautes, aboard a trireme, the pinnacle of ancient Greek naval engineering. This isn't just a boat. It's a sleek, deadly predator, a long, narrow wooden vessel built for speed and impact. Its most distinguishing feature: 3 banks of oars on each side, stacked above each other, giving it immense power and the name trireme. Imagine building a supercar out of wood and powering it with 170 highly synchronized humans. It sounds like a bad idea for a weekend project, but it was a marvel of its time. So, as you lay your head down tonight, remember the ancient Greek warrior. Remember the heavy shield, the disciplined push, the desperate cries of battle. Remember the ingenuity of the trireme, the grinding reality of sieges, and the vital importance of a full belly and fresh water. Remember the chilling influence of omens and the subtle power of psychological warfare. And remember that the lessons learned on those dusty plains and shimmering seas, the scars of their victories and defeats, seeded a legacy of military thought that continues to influence strategists and historians even today. It was a brutal world, but one that left us with profound insights into the human condition under pressure and the timeless art of war. Now, let your breathing slow. Feel the softness of the blanket. The echoes of ancient battle fade into the night, turning into dust that shimmers in the dim light. Imagine the warriors returning home, the ships moored, and the walls at peace. The lessons of courage, of sacrifice, and of the importance of unity are yours now. Let your mind drift to the green olive groves, the calm waves of the Aegean, and ancient temples under the moonlight. It was a turbulent past, but from it a great legacy was born, a legacy of wisdom and resilience. Do not worry about the battles or the burdens. There is only peace, understanding, and a deep sleep that beckons you. Everything is stable, and you are safe. Let these last images fade gently, like incense smoke in the night. Only peace remains. Good night. A common historical fact is that the trireme was the most advanced warship of the ancient Mediterranean, famous for its speed and maneuverability. It was designed not for boarding and hand-to-hand combat, though that could happen, but primarily for ramming. Picture a sleek, low-slung vessel, about 120 feet long and 15-20 feet wide, with a pointed bronze ram extending from its bow. This ram, often shaped like a trident or a boar's head, was your primary weapon. It's like turning a giant rowing boat into a very fast, very sharp spear. Your goal is to punch a hole in the enemy's hull, sending them to a watery grave. But from these scars emerged the seeds of a legacy that transcended the battlefield. The tactical innovations, the understanding of combined arms, the importance of logistics, and the psychological dimensions of warfare. These lessons were not lost. They were recorded by historians like Thucydides, analyzed by philosophers, and later studied by military commanders for centuries. The concept of disciplined infantry, of strategic maneuvering, and of adapting to new threats became fundamental tenets of military science. You were part of this grand experiment, a living testament to humanity's endless struggle to organize, to fight, and to understand the nature of conflict. Life as a trireme rower was brutally demanding. You weren't a slave, typically, but a free citizen, often from the poorer classes, who volunteered or was conscripted. This is a common historical fact, often overlooked in the glamour of hoplite warfare naval power, particularly for a maritime state like Athens, relied heavily on its non-elite citizens. You'd spend countless hours training, not just for strength, but for perfect synchronization. Imagine 170 oars, each manned by a single individual, all moving in perfect unison. One rower out of sync could disrupt the entire rhythm, slowing the ship or even causing a collision. It's like a synchronized swimming team, but instead of graceful dives, you're trying to achieve maximum destructive force, and if you mess up, you might get a splinter or sink. So, as you lay your head down tonight, remember the ancient Greek warrior. Remember the heavy shield, the disciplined push, the desperate cries of battle. Remember the ingenuity of the trireme, the grinding reality of sieges, and the vital importance of a full belly and fresh water. Remember the chilling influence of omens and the subtle power of psychological warfare. And remember that the lessons learned on those dusty plains and shimmering seas, the scars of their victories and defeats, seeded a legacy of military thought that continues to influence strategists and historians even today. It was a brutal world, but one that left us with profound insights into the human condition under pressure and the timeless art of war. Now, let your breathing slow. Feel the softness of the blanket. The echoes of ancient battle fade into the night, turning into dust that shimmers in the dim light. Imagine the warriors returning home, the ships moored, and the walls at peace. The lessons of courage, of sacrifice, and of the importance of unity are yours now. Let your mind drift to the green olive groves, the calm waves of the Aegean, and ancient temples under the moonlight. It was a turbulent past, but from it a great legacy was born, a legacy of wisdom and resilience, do not worry about the battles or the burdens. There is only peace, understanding, and a deep sleep that beckons you. Everything is stable, and you are safe. Let these last images fade gently, like incense smoke in the night. Only peace remains. Good night. Your seat is cramped, your space minimal. Below deck, the air is hot, humid, and thick with the smell of sweat, unwashed bodies, and pitch. You breathe in sync with your fellow rowers, your muscles burning with each stroke. There's no room for privacy, no escape from the collective exertion. The rhythmic creak of the oarlocks, the splash of the oars, the shouts of the Kelliusts, the rowing master, these are the sounds that dominate your existence. You feel the surge of the ship beneath you, the spray of the sea on your face if you're on the upper deck, the relentless pull of the oar.